Well, hello there, and welcome back to Lay It on the Table. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mahaffey, and of course, with me, as always, is the ever young-looking James. Hi, James.
Hello, Joe. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. So, it's interesting. We had an opportunity to talk the Monday after Easter, and I cannot believe that I completely missed a major headline in the gaming industry that happened just before Easter. And that is, and I'm going to share it with you here on the screen here, because It seems that our friends at Wizards of the Coast have spent $146 million on D&D Beyond, buying it from Fandom.
Yep.
And of course, James and I are involved in a D&D game that meets every other week. I never know if I should call that bi-weekly or bi-monthly, so I'm just not even going to try. But we rely on this software a lot. Everybody keeps their character sheets in there. We're running the encounters there, and I've always thought that Wizards of the Coast was going to move in this direction, and that I always felt like they could build it better or buy it better than they could build it. The question I have is, I wonder if they're going to go all the way and get into the whole virtual tabletop realm, because Roll20's out there, Foundry's out there. There's so many other folks in the space that have kind of created these, open source environments. But this was sort of pretty big news because, Hasbro had a stellar financial year during the pandemic, largely because of Wizards of the Coast, which of course is D&D, it's Magic the Gathering. It's all of those things that people have been playing online or playing with their friends in their bubble, if you will. And so, so I was just curious, did you notice this? Did you hear about this? And what are your thoughts?
Oh, it very much hit my attention. And I had similar responses to what you're talking about, too. I was like, well, we're licensing it, but why don't we just give them a chunk of money now and just have that come straight into our coffers, as opposed to, waiting around and getting all these licensing fees and such. So, yeah, that definitely, and it makes good sense. I also like the narrative. Yes, you can buy it better than you can build it. So this all makes sense to me too. I was talking with Laura about this purchase as well, and thinking about, as you were mentioning, the virtual tabletops. And one of the advantage of something like Forge or Roll20 is that, or Foundry rather, and Roll20 is that they've got a whole bunch of other brands that you can also do this. So you can do Call of Cthulhu or what have you. And so I don't know if WotC wants to just sort of double down and say, well, we'll do that space for others as well, or are they going to do a just kind of, we'll make a sweeter, prettier version of Strixhaven or Barovia that everybody else isn't just going to be so amazing that people will drift over to there. It feels like they're it's a different sort of question. The getting this D&D Beyond, which is so much focused on how to play the game more quickly, easily, have all of your information in one spot, and have a kind of open space like a virtual tabletop that could be used for anybody. I'm interested to see how, and I was telling Laura too, I bet there are attorneys right now working very hard, pulling extra shifts, as it were, to sort out what that deal is going to look like.
Well, and there's a couple of things. Like, number one, I typically buy the book from Wizards of the Coast, and then I'll buy the digital book because it just makes it easier for me to navigate. And I'll be curious to see if there's going to be some commingling around buy the hard copy and digital together, which is something that's sort of been outside of our reach. And I also think too, D&D Beyond has been great in this virtual world where we've relied on Roll20 for you to be where you live, for us to be where we live, and everybody's kind of spread out and can join the game. And I like that. I do miss not being able to play in a live setting sometimes. And we've talked about that because it's so much easier for me as the DM to have this command center and not have to lug a gazillion things to the store. But I'm curious to see how they also invest in the whole virtual tabletop like that setup that I have, where I can put the TV in a box and put it on the table. And now all of a sudden I have an interactive map that you can still put your minis on, and you've got that experience. And I think that it's so tailored for one way I'll be curious to see if we'll be able to, if they'll bridge that gap a little bit.
That'll be interesting to see. I'm also, I think one of the reasons the virtual tabletops have been so successful is what you were talking about. You know, we've got people in different spaces, but it's also sort of, as you were saying, it's also just damned convenient to be able to, D&D starts in 5 minutes. I don't have to drive 20 minutes across town. We don't have to worry about ordering, who's going to order the pizza? Where is it going to get, we'll take a break. I'm going to go in my kitchen and get my stuff and come back. And there's just, you miss some of the perhaps physicality of watching people like, no, you're not going to do that, of whole bodied in this.
Right.
But it just makes it easy to get 6 adults who are otherwise super busy to say, well, we're going to spend 3 hours playing D&D, but I don't have to worry about, driving there, putting extra time on either side of it to make it happen. And I do like the idea of the extra technology to facilitate that, screen on a table and miniatures. Always fun. And then there's the cat.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of your cat kind of leads me into the next. I was just kind of scanning board game news, and I saw that Netflix, I don't know if you saw this, Netflix is coming out with a streaming series based on Exploding Kittens.
Oh,
with
wow.
Lucy Liu. Let's see here. Lucy Liu. And where did I see that? I'm looking at thegeekdad.com. He has a list of sort of the gaming news that happened in the last week. And it was talking about the fact that they were going to do this game, and it was, or this TV show. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I like Lucy Liu.
Exploding Kittens.
Exploding Kittens, the TV show. Not really sure how that's going to work.
I'm very curious about that.
Oh, yeah, here we go. The next board game to make the leap to the silver screen is Exploding Kittens, which is being adapted as a series by Netflix. The adult animated series, okay, so that helps a little bit. The adult animated series will star Tom Ellis, Lucy Liu, and Ali, I'm going to say this wrong, Maki, Maki, I don't know, and will be on the streamer next year. Netflix and Exploding Kittens are also teaming up to create Exploding Kittens, the game, a video game based on the card game, due out in May. Now, this news was out before Netflix took a little bath and the stock market.
True.
But I don't know how this is going to play into that. And this is not a show to talk about stock, so we won't. But I just find that's interesting that some of these properties are making the leap from, sort of a cult favorite into the mainstream. Because like my kids, like my daughter has, her parents are playing board games. She's like, nope, I don't need to do that. But she found Exploding Kittens and she liked it. And so that was kind of like, okay, here's this, not your parents board game kind of thing or game. But it was funny in the same article it was talking about, well, Firefly's never coming back, but Gale Force 9 is coming out with new versions of the Firefly game series. So it's just kind of this back and forth between IP, I guess, that's happening in the space. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. More than anything, that they were making a TV show out of that.
I'm always fascinated by taking a board game and turning it into some sort of movie, TV show. It's just hard to figure out where you're going to go with that. So I don't know. I wouldn't have guessed Exploding Kittens, but
well, on top of that,
good for them.
When Hasbro kind of reformatted Wizards of the Coast, one of the things they wanted to make them into is more of an entertainment company. So they've got this new Dungeons and Dragons movie coming out, Honor Amongst Thieves, which is going to be this Forgotten Realms and the Sword Coast kind of thing. So, and it's due to be released next March. So we'll see if they stick to the schedule and see if that happens. But it'll be just kind of curious to see. So,
yep. I mean that D&D sort of makes sense. There's a lot of visual stuff to it, and it lends itself to storytelling clearly. Yeah, I'll just be curious to see what that animation looks like too.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, because now this is totally not board game related, but we've talked a little bit about how I've been sort of using Elden Ring as a brain candy. I saw an interview with George R.R. Martin that talked about he laid out the story years ago, and it's all just been being developed at this point. So it's just, the reason I bring that up is just the amount of time it takes to get from concept to production in a gaming environment when you're being meticulous with the details as opposed to just throwing an engine at it is kind of interesting. But
and it's something, as I was in publishing for many years, and this is the same is true for books. That whole from concept to finished project takes a while, and George R.R. Martin would know a lot more about how long it takes to get a book to
bear. Well, and it's funny too, because I'm reading another article that came out this week on Fox Business, and it's interesting to me because Fox Business and CNBC and these more Bloomberg type of business sites, they're now covering the board game space, and in this particular one, it's talking about shipping, manufacturing delays are upsetting the board game industry, and this is the subheadline. It's taking an average of 111 days for goods to get from Asia to the U.S., leaving many customers without games that they purchased years ago. And I have a few in my Kickstarter that truly are in a couple of years. So I think I don't know if it's years ago. I guess it's more than one, but still, I just think it's interesting that it's getting the kind of coverage, in that regard. But anyway, it's kind of interesting from my perspective. So have you run across anything interesting, newsworthy in the realm of board gaming this week?
Well, that was the D&D Beyond purchase by WotC was the one that really caught my attention as well. So I was glad that we spent some time thinking about it, talking about it. Other than that, it's been kind of busy around here. I haven't been paying too much attention to media. The school year is crashing to an end. So there's been a whole lot of doing events and as well as reading a lot of student papers. So,
well, it's funny you bring that up because I was perusing Facebook as I am wont to do, and I found this picture that you posted. I guess you took these games into the last day of class, and this was like part of the final. Help me understand the story behind this, because I'm not sure if I followed all that in the post.
Yeah, no worries. It was a fairly brief little post there. So this was the end of my first year writing seminar. Game On. Tabletop games and contemporary culture. I'll be teaching it again in the fall and again in next spring. So we'll see these kind of shots a lot, I hope. And so they were, writing and using games as a sort of focus and topic as they wrote various kinds of essays. And since we had, and readings that we did. And so when we got to the end of the semester, Furman University likes final exams to either have a final exam or have a sort of final experience. So it's a writing class. I'm not sure what kind of exam you would have, but an experience, now that we could do. So I have more than a few board games at home. So I was able to, I bought this bag too, explicitly for pretty much this event. So loaded up a bunch of stuff, some that we had talked about during class, and then for 2.5 hours, we sat and played board games.
That is awesome. And for those of you
it was super fun.
For those of you who are just listening and don't have a visual on this, it's a game bag full of about, 10 to 15 games, perhaps.
Yep. I think about 15.
Yeah, ranging from.
We've got, let's see, there's Ingenious and Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, Splendor, Codenames, Just One, Dude. The game. Dude. Parks was also there. Flux, a couple versions of Similo, Pairs, Bells, Love Letter, all that kind of stuff. So mostly super light games and kind of entry level, just stuff that I figured I could keep 15 rule sets in my head and toss them on a table very easily if they're that kind of level and that are not going to bake the students' brains.
Nice.
So.
Well, and
Sushi Go, Sushi Go actually kind of blew their minds with the whole drafting thing. Like, wait, I have a hand of cards. You have one card. Put it down. Give the hand to the next person. What? Like, yeah, you're not going to keep your hand of cards.
Yeah.
So that kind of disturbed them a little bit.
That's a lot like Isle of Cats in many ways. when you're doing the drafting, etc.
Yep. So this is, Sushi Go is just a very basic introduction to drafting as a mechanism.
Oh, yeah. And of course, Love Letters, I did notice in the news segment that I was perusing earlier, is coming out with a 10th anniversary edition, which means it's been around.
Yeah. And so many different versions of it. I've got basic Love Letter there, but you can get Batman Love Letter, which I thought was interesting.
He just keeps giving it to Catwoman over and over again. Never mind. I don't need to go there.
The relationship with him and Commissioner Gordon is.
Okay. That could be a whole completely different podcast if you just talked about Batman and the Love Letter component. But what's interesting is, so you had in there a couple of games, and like Ticket to Ride is a great example. And so I've been in this board gaming hobby aggressively probably since 2018. So that's, we talked about that in the origin story episode a couple episodes ago, and just sort of how we find it. But what I've noticed, and I can't decide if this is arrogance or just experience, but there's certain games that I've just sort of stayed away from because they're too, I don't want to say simple, because I don't know that that's true, but I think they're kind of mainstreamy, or they're kind of like the way I would view like the Monopoly and the Clues of the world. Not that those are bad games, but they're just not the ones that appeal to me. And Ticket to Ride and Settlers of Catan, for me, fall into that category. And I don't know if that's just me being a snob, or just me, the heart wants what the heart wants and the heart doesn't want those games, or what. And so, obviously you're a lot more tenured in this environment, and you may have even been in the middle of it when Catan came out. Not that I'm calling you old in any way, shape, or form, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on people that kind of view certain games in that way?
It always feels like I was a fan of, I don't know, pick a band, Briston Maroney before, he made it, kind of thing. It feels a bit like that. And I mean, Catan is a mid 90s, right? And sort of fired up this whole, it is the spark that lit the fuse in many respects. So I appreciate that. And got Rio Grande Games, bringing in a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah. And I mean, I've played Catan a fair amount. It's a pretty fun game. It's nicely done. And Ticket, I like Ticket because it's just so easy to say, hey, we're going to play gin rummy, we're going to play gin, and we've got little plastic, trains on a board to do that. It just makes it easy to get into something that isn't a Clue, where you're just roll your dice. So much of Clue is just spent, trying to get from room to room before you can even ask a question. Sure. Oh, look, it's a 1 again. Okay. That's the end of my turn. And there are choices and strategies in both of them that they're not super challenging, sure, but they get people going. So Ticket, I was there in the bag. Yep. And the students, a couple of them are like, oh, I love Ticket to Ride. And so they were able to take the box right out, open it up, and play, and teach the rest of the students who were in that group how to play Ticket to Ride. And it was super fun to watch them. One of the poor women who was playing just kind of got screwed with all of the connections everywhere. So she's like, I've got 8 points, and everybody else is zooming around.
Well, what I will say about Catan in particular is that typically when I talk to somebody about board games, they'll say, oh, like Settlers of Catan. And it becomes sort of this on-ramp into another discussion. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to play that game with them in order to bring them forward. And sure. and you know what? I'll be totally candid. I've never even played the game. I'd probably sit down and love it and go, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. And I have other games that have been inspired by Ticket to Ride. I mean, Trekking the World in many respects, mm-hmm. and Trekking the National Parks is very much a kind of a the way the map is sort of navigated is similar to that, and we do enjoy those kinds of games, and I probably would enjoy them. I just have kind of put them in this mental category of where I think they fit, and that's me. I think it's just, like I said, I think it's just the way I view the world and what I'm drawn to, I suppose, because there are a lot of games that come out that I just kind of like,
Yeah.
not for me.
Well, and I think it's an important, like, once you've started getting into, well, whatever hobby, in this case, it's board games, tabletop games, knowing where you are, what your interests are, what directions, what you're interested in and not, right? So do I want to play, troops on a map kind of games? Do I want to go heavy into 18xx games? Do I just want to play a lot of super light games? And then Catan's as heavy as I want to get, right? So we get these different, I love that there's enough out there that you can have these choices, as opposed to your only option is going to Target and Walmart 10 years ago, and you had Clue and Stratego and so on, and that was kind of your options. So my students, even, they would ask me, they would at this last event here, I'd say, wow, where do you get these games? It's like, well, order them online. There's a couple of game shops here in Greenville. Boardwalk, still a fantastic gold standard kind of place to go.
Right.
And like, you have to go there, though. You have to seek these things out. And so I think there are a lot of people who aren't willing to do that, and people who are, again, just happy to play something basic. And then there are people who do the kind of lifestyle game choice where it's like, we're going to play Wingspan 400 times and that's all we play, and we will go ahead and get all the geek up bits, and we will get all the flashy whatever we can do to make this a super awesome experience, but that's all we're going to play. Like, that's it. We've got 3 games, and another 2 years down the road it's going to be a different game, and we'll play that for 5 years, and then and that's another way to do it. It's not, clearly not my way of doing that, but
well, and I can see Wingspan becoming for other people what Catan came for me. That everybody's playing it. It's the end thing. Therefore, I will shun it. But it was interesting. I saw today in the Wingspan group on Facebook. It says it was, do you prefer to play Wingspan in person, or do you prefer to play it on like Tabletopia or some other medium? And I of course had to post a meme of Olivia Newton-John getting physical, because that's the way I like to play Wingspan. But it, obviously Tabletopia exploded during the pandemic, and then we do have the iPad versions of Wingspan and Root and Scythe and Viticulture, for no other reason that it's more for solo play for us. Like, we're bored. My wife wants to, like, when we're playing D&D, my wife will play a game and she can play the Wingspan on her iPad while we're doing the D&D thing. And it's not like she's playing solitaire, so to speak.
Yep.
And so
I have Ascension is my go-to for that. I have it on my phone, and I can play 1,800 cards all at once. And Laura likes to play Carcassonne, which is why I'm never going to play Carcassonne with her again. She's played 1,000 games of it, and I'm like, nope.
I hear that she's a little aggressive with
it. She is.
And Laura, if you're listening, there's only one person that could have told me that. So, so, but it's interesting though, because the other game that I don't know where I've landed on this yet, because when I got into the board gaming again, as it was a magic shop where I saw the dice, right? But I'm not a Magic player. And the game store in Pineville, Carolina Tabletop Games, great place to go here in the Charlotte area, did not have a lot of Magic. And part of that was because they serve beer. And if you want to do a tournament for Magic or Pokemon as well, there are certain rules. And one of those rules is you can't have alcohol within a certain radius, I guess, just because they're the young people.
Interesting.
So it's, I mean, makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I can see that.
But what I've also noticed is that here lately, the amount of Magic being played has gone up precipitously as we've come out of the pandemic, and I've noticed that they're moving through a lot more inventory of cards. I've seen people come in to get like their starter decks and their expansion decks, and there's this whole thing happening, and it's not a game I've ever played. I've been invited to play a number of times. I have a deck that we assembled with the owner's help, Rob, at the game store for one of my wife's nephews. No, nice. Not nephews, cousins.
Okay.
Anyway, so it was one of those things where, but we still haven't played. But I was just sitting. I was in the game store this week. I went in. I was talking to the owner. He had a large shipment of things to unpack and put on the board on his shelves, which was nice. But there was a bunch of people in there playing Magic, and it just kind of got me thinking about it from this perspective. That's just one of those things where the set collection, the card gaming kind of stuff. Because I tried, oh shoot, I'll come back to it. There was one I did,
something like Keyforge.
Keyforge is exactly what it was. Thank you. Yes, it's like I have a whole slew of Keyforge back behind me up in one of these cabinets that I never touch anymore. It's just like, it was a fad for me. For me, it was a fad. And I have these like collectible keys and mats and stuff that were just, nice. You know, I need to figure out what to do with those. Anyway, getting back to Magic though. I mean, what are your thoughts on Magic as a game, and have you played it?
I've not. I came into this hobby when I was, it felt like everybody I knew who was into Magic started when they were like teens. Mm-hmm. And I think like pre-teen, teen, when you can get super obsessed and you can get into Magic, just to start off, you can get into it fairly cheap. But if you want to actually win, it's going to be super expensive, right? And so the kid with the most money is going to be the winner. But I've had friends, and so I've had friends who are big into Magic, but again, they started very young, and it just kind of stayed with them, and they're devoted to it. And it looks like a fantastic game. And it also feels like you would have to commit so much. It's a lifestyle game, like we were talking about earlier. Like, this is the game we're going to play. And it takes so much to like get into it, get into the strategies, get into like, I think playing casually could be fun. It looks like it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of games that I play that pull from these kinds of ideas, because it stomped like a Godzilla and left that size footprint in the space. But it's not one that I feel driven to seek out. So I thought Keyforge would be fun because it's a more constrained. So that was nice. I picked up Star Realms, which is another sort of card battler kind of game. So, but I was just leery of you have to buy new packs all the time, and I felt like I could get that sort of fantasy hit, and that the way that rules sort of intersect, and you have to plan out in advance how things are going to happen. I could get that elsewhere. But I have a great deal of respect for it, and it feels like the people who have come up through Magic have a way of thinking about games and play that is pretty intense and pretty fantastic. So I think it's a wonderful game. I'm not going to, you can't convince me to speak ill of it, but it's not one that I am super stoked to start getting into.
Well, and it's fair, and I think I appreciate your perspective on that, because it goes with the theme of certain games and how they speak to you. But it was Jared Carmichael, who has the 3 Minute Board Game YouTube channel. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I love his work. He did a top 10, and there's a lot of top kind of lists. But he put out there his Magic the Gathering as one of these games that was just easy as a starter game, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think he approached it from the point of casual play.
Yep.
Now this guy, it's interesting. He does his channel out of New Zealand, So, think about the supply chain and how games get there.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a quick overview of the game you're about to play in about 3 minutes, his channel is fantastic because he breaks everything down. And then his wife, she goes by Teffy.
Okay.
She will feature certain games, and she did the one on Obsession because she loves Obsession. In fact, Obsession has got one of their 3-minute board game awards on the box, the reprint.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. Anyway, so no, it's just kind of interesting because that's a lot of times I'll find that those kinds of lists will kind of inspire me to look at games that I haven't looked at. Because like right now, there's like the top 10 games you should have in your collection. The top 10 games I got rid of last year, because there's a lot of curation, I guess, of a collection sometimes. And I struggle with this too, because I have, games on my wall that we haven't touched in forever. And I kind of wonder, what should I do with those? Colors of Paris is a great example. We love Colors of Paris. It's a fantastic game, but we find that now we gravitate to other games like Artsy or others that have a similar theme, but just take it a little bit deeper, and you get that satisfaction in the scratch of the brain, if you will, but in a more robust way. And all of a sudden there's a mechanic that becomes or not as appealing to us. And so you have to, or Canvas is another example of that, where Canvas takes that concept and just gives you so much more satisfaction in the gameplay. So you just kind of wonder, what do you do with those kinds of games? By the way, I love Colors of Paris. I'm not saying it's a crappy game in any way, shape, or form, but it's gathering dust on my shelf.
Yeah,
for that reason.
Well, and I think some of these questions of like, is it a mechanism that's intriguing? Is it a topic that's intriguing? Sometimes it's just going to be, I don't know if I'm ever going to play Tzolk'in ever again, but there's no way I'm going to get rid of it because of the years and the way that works. So there's not, I don't see that all of a sudden becoming super popular again. Noria does it kind of similar with a different sort of a circular pyramid, as it were, 3 rings, and you spin them each time, and so that's kind of a fun thing that I'm going to keep. But at the same time, this question of weight is also helpful, right? So it may be that you want a nice heavy game to bite into, like I really want to scratch the deeper itch of the brain, as it were, or it's the end of the semester. And so, it's a crunch time, and Laura and I would like to have something to talk about that's not the baby, that's not work. And, something like Honey Buzz is maybe a little too much going on. There's just too many little moving parts. That's super fun and great for keeping things going. And Parks takes a lot of time to set up and tear down.
Yep.
But we picked up Quacks of Quedlinburg recently, leave it out on the table, and there's not a whole lot. It's fun enough. There's that little bit of push your luck and try to, fill that bag with the best things, and you'll still go bust anyway.
Yep. Love that game.
But once you've got that rhythm going, though, it takes 20 minutes to play a game of Quacks.
Yeah.
And it's great. Emerson's down for his nap. I need to break from grading. Let's play a couple of quick games of Quacks because it's perfect for that.
Well, and that's why, in our world, because our kids are older and we're able to have a space that's dedicated to game. That's why we put a game on the table at the beginning of the week and just sort of leave it. It's set up and it's just ready to go. And so recently, hold on. We got this Arc Nova, and it is going to be our game of the week this week because it's nice. It's basically, and I'm not unique with this description. I heard somebody else say this, and it's spot on. And that is, this is Zoo Tycoon as if it were a board game. So we talk about the video game going board game, Arc Nova, and it was interesting because I saw a review of this that Jamie Stagmeyer did, and evidently this is the publisher that also helps them with Wingspan in Europe. And Capstone, Fireland and Capstone Games.
Fireland,
Fireland. So this is the same publisher as New York Zoo and Coffee Traders, and so it's a hefty game. Then talking about the supply chain, this showed up on my doorstep Friday.
Okay.
Fjords. It's like tile placement. I gotta get tile placement and such. So we have not opened this up yet. I mean, obviously I took it out of the shrink wrap, so you would judge me less. But a neighbor of ours has got a young person living with them for this school year who's from this part of the world, and we thought this would be a fun game too.
Super fun. Well, and it's. I mean, you were talking about having a table, and so we have as well. We kind of have this weirdly laid out ranch house that was originally a little bungalow that then had one thing added on and then another thing added on. So it's this oddly Frankensteinian house. So we have essentially 2 living rooms. And so one of the living rooms has a game table set up permanently and
nice.
Made a little gaming surface for it. So it's, yeah.
So,
Quacks is out there waiting for us
all
the time.
Yeah. That's one of the nice things about having it always accessible. Now, this is probably getting too nerdy in the process, but I have like a 24-inch Lazy Susan that we put in the middle of our table. It's 24 inches. And it's great because you can set up the wingspan mechanism on it. And then just everybody can sit in their little 4 corners because it's a 48 by 48 table, which is a little longer. It's that Game Toppers game table that I talked about.
You're talking about, yep.
And because I wanted it kind of optimized for D&D, but it also is great when you have these kinds of games. And we use the Lazy Susan a lot. In fact, we have a smaller Lazy Susan that we keep in our game bag that if we go to the game store or we go to my wife's parents or what have you, we'll take that with us and set it up on the table because it just makes games like Wingspan, like Parks, like Viticulture so much more accessible when you have people that have to share resources. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work with New York Zoo because that's such a long... You run into some challenges with that one, but it works well with others anyway.
Yeah, nice.
So I know you've been grading papers. Is Quacks been the game du jour for you guys?
Oh yeah, for many days now.
Yeah.
Because again, it's easy. We can leave it set up, and then you just walk in, start pulling chips out of a bag, and there you go. So yeah, it's been definitely our go-to. It's super simple. The other one that we've been playing a lot of is Jump Drive, which I think is right over here. Ouch. There we go. And, yep. I've got it upside down, reading it this way. So we got Tom Lehman.
Jump Drive.
And so is
it a card game or a board game? What is it?
It is mostly a card game. So it's funny. It started... I see if I can do this biography quickly. So first we have Puerto Rico. And then Tom Lehman started working on a kind of card game, and they were looking for a card game version of Puerto Rico. And he had some ideas that he was working on that would become Race for the Galaxy, but instead he turned it into San Juan, the card game.
Okay.
Which is the sort of card game version of Puerto Rico. And then he expanded it back out to Race for the Galaxy. And then Jump Drive is kind of a stripped down version of Race for the Galaxy. So it's this whole 4 games, very different themes. Well, there's the Caribbean theme, and then there's the space theme. And so it doesn't have the role selection that you do, or that you do in Race or in Puerto Rico, San Juan. So it doesn't have that, and it only has 2 kinds of planets, but it does have the sort of multi-use cards, where the cards are the currency to put to buy them so they can be in your display, your tableau.
Right.
But it goes about somewhere between 6 and 8 turns roughly. You're building a very quick engine, and at about 6 or 7 you're trying to find a way to put down one of these big 9 or point cards that just sort of fires everything off, and you're racing to 50 points. and we can knock out a game of Jump Drive in 15, 20 minutes. It's yeah, and one of the things that's kind of nice about it is you're sort of like Quacks. You're super dependent on the luck of whatever draw, the cards, the chips, and you have like one or two decision points that aren't super hard to make a decision about, and then it goes very quickly. So it also has the advantage then of not asking a whole lot of you and then being done very quickly. So you're not just sitting around doing something that doesn't ask a lot of you for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever.
You know, as you were going through the laundry list of the different games there that kind of brought that to fruition, I was reminded a little bit about our conversation last time with Nate in terms of the whole game design process and how they are in the queue, and does the publisher pick them up, and if they don't, does another publisher pick them up? I mean, it's really, you know, there's so much dynamically going on in the space, particularly if you're not a Kickstarter type of person. It just was kind of makes me wonder, you know, like, what isn't getting published that I would probably really, really like?
Yeah. Well, and one of the interesting things about Kickstarter is it did open up a space for people who had an idea, who found a way to fully bake the idea, and some didn't. Right? I mean, there are some that are notoriously bad. Some are just sort of notoriously all about the miniatures. There's ones that never deliver. That's also
I've got mine.
But it opens up a space for someone like Kayenta with Obsession, right?
Yep.
That's like, here's a good game, and nobody's necessarily picking it up, or they didn't want to go with a sort of traditional publisher because they figured whatever they figured. And Kickstarter opens that up.
And the quality of the materials in that game. I don't know if I ever told you that when I got Obsession, one of my meeples was literally cut in half. I had like a half a meeple. And I reached out to Dan and I said, hey, just want to let you know. And he said, no problem. And he sent me not only the replacement meeple, he sent me like a packet of meeples, additional meeples.
Oh, wow.
And another bag. And it was just more of and I'm sure it was just easier for him to have spare parts kind of done that way. And it was a lot easier to facilitate as opposed to finding the one little thing. But at the same time, the level of, hey, no problem, we'll take care of it. Here you go. I had a similar issue with my copy of Cascadia, where one of my chips didn't have any screen printing on it. A minor issue, first world problem. And I sent him a note. I still haven't received anything. And just the level, not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it's just, it doesn't stop me from playing the game. Right. But it's just, if you're an OCD type of personality, which I could have tendencies towards, it does get on my nerves. I had something similar happen with Tang Garden, but those guys at Thundergriff took care of it. They just had to ship it from South America, so it took a little longer. But it came.
Take a little longer.
But it came.
Yeah.
It came. So
that's good.
Can I complain? So
that's good.
Well, from my perspective, I think, as we continue down this path of just sort of talking about some of these issues, some days we're going to have a lot more to talk about, and some days we're going to have fewer things to talk about. And I am looking forward to getting some other guests in our realm, and definitely having Nate back on at some point. I think that was an interesting conversation that I don't think was quite resolved. So we'll have to work on that, but I don't want that to be an every time kind of thing. But from my perspective, here we are, we're marching into May. We got a lot of things going on, like Mother's Day is coming up, and that is typically a time where our Mother's Day has kind of evolved into Dale gets to pick the game and we play it all day.
Nice.
So that's kind of what we're going to be doing next week. I don't know if you have any traditions as you're moving towards that realm.
We
the
don't.
End of the year.
We will probably play games. Laura likes this. It's also, today is May Day, which is International Workers' Day. So although this will hit the internets well after that, but worker placement games for labor history.
There you go. I didn't think of that. It's worker placement. You know what? That we should just co-opt this day and make it Worker Placement Day as well, sort of like an add-on. And then when we get a couple of days away into Cinco de Mayo, we can pull out some games and play those. Like a Chichen Itza. Isn't there a Chichen Itza game there's a There's a Mexico game, I know.
Yep. The Mexico, one of the three Mask Trilogy games.
Yeah.
And I've got what is the name of the?
And then Memorial Day will just pull out Axis and Allies.
There you
Which go. All kidding aside, I've seen folks do at the game store on like Memorial Day or June 6th or something like that. They will bring in a certain type of game and play that. There's one guy that's got a really interesting World War II game that he brings in on a pretty consistent basis. The more of the miniature type of gaming, which is always fun.
No, I think it's a fun way to, go back if you've got a larger collection to say, okay, well, it's this day, it's this holiday. Let's look for something that's on that holiday theme. Why not?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for this segment. I don't know if you have anything else you want to cover.
No, I think we talked about a bunch of good stuff. So feels like a good point to wrap up here.
Well, as I always like to say, I'm never bored. I'm just bored gaming. And of course, you have the best clothes of all.
Thanks for listening, everybody. May all your tiebreakers break your way.
There we go. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on Lay It on the Table. Bye-bye now.
Bye.